get started in just a second here. Thank you so much for coming out, especially fighting traffic to get here. I promise it will be well worth your commute. My name is Kathleen Stempert, and I oversee PR and marketing for the Cultural Arts Division. So welcome to you all. A couple of housekeeping rules. First, we ask that you please silence your cell phone. And also, if you need the restroom at any point, it is out this door and to the left behind the yellow wall. I would like to thank the folks here at the Gordy Arts Center for letting us use their beautiful space, and I encourage you to check out the show that they have on view here and all of their programs. They're really doing some fabulous stuff. I also want to remind you that this is the second in what is a 3-part PR and marketing workshop series. And the next event will be on Wednesday, October the 4th at 6 at the George Washington Carver Museum. And it will be an arts media roundtable in which we will invite different journalists and arts editors here in Austin to answer your questions and share what they look for when you write a press release or when you pitch them. So be sure and get that on your calendar. And finally, I would really appreciate it if all of you could fill out this survey that I gave you when you came in. We really do value your input and tailor the workshops accordingly, so thank you for doing that. And without further ado, I am incredibly delighted to introduce to you Allie Klein. Allie is going to be our speaker this evening. Allie ventured into social media after founding the art history blog Cave to Canvas in 2011, which at its peak had an incredible 200,000 followers, and collaborated with the Whitney Museum, the Pace Gallery, and even Tumblr. During this time, Allie also served as the social media manager for the grassroots art organization Slow Art Day. In 2013, Allie graduated from the University of Texas at Austin with dual degrees in English and art history. She is the former digital content strategist for the Blanton Museum of Art. And at the museum, Allie implemented the museum's first social media strategy and grew the following on social just tremendously, in addition to overseeing digital communications and marketing, also the museum's website and a host of other activities. Allie currently is with Texas Monthly Magazine, where she oversees their digital content. She works to bring the storied magazine to a new generation of readers on the digital platform. And Allie has given lectures all over, and most recently at the Museum Computer Network Conference, the Texas Commission on the Arts, and the National Arts Marketing Conference, among others. You can follow her on Twitter and Instagram at Allie Klein. And without further ado, Allie Klein.
Hey y'all, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Kathleen, obviously in the city of Austin. I am really excited to talk to you guys today about social media. Just some sort of housekeeping stuff. My Twitter and website are there if y'all have questions during the presentation. If you don't mind just kind of holding on to them until the end, just write them down, do whatever you have to do. We'll have like a question period at the end.
Tweet them.
Sorry?
We will tweet the question.
You could tweet them, but there's no service in here, which is freaking me out. I really don't like it. So I would say please tweet them, but if you can find a signal, go for it. I will have to look at it afterwards, though, unfortunately. So I want to start off with a spoiler alert, and this honestly is the most important thing I can tell you all day. Take this to heart, embrace it. It's uncomfortable, but just embrace it. There is no secret sauce to social media at all. Trust me when I say what works for one institution or person is not going to work for someone else. And sometimes there can be a lot of overlap, and sometimes there is just not at all. So what we go over today is kind of what's worked for me. It's worked at the Blanton. I cannot guarantee it will work for you. Everyone's audience is different. Everyone's social media presence is different. So please, please, please keep this in mind. These are just sort of guidelines that we'll be talking about today, things that I found that work, and hopefully they work for you too. That's what we're here today to talk about. There will be some memes during this presentation, just to keep it light. I really like memes, so there'll be a few. So what we're going to go over today is first how to create a digital strategy. This is sort of your building block for social media. There's no point in doing it if you don't have a plan, right? Just with anything else, if you just sort of go into it, helter-skelter, oh, I'll just post an image today. You're not going to get the most out of it, right? So we're going to go over how to actually create a digital strategy for your organization, your personal brand, whatever. We're also going to go over the 3 major networks, so Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. There are more. We can't cover them all during the time we have, so we're just going to kind of stick with the big 3. We're going to go over best practices for each platform, things that I found that can hopefully help y'all out. And we're also going to cover analytics, so kind of how you can start looking at data to help you make better decisions on social. And then we'll kind of wrap up with a few resources that I found that are really helpful for me just as I go about my day-to-day. So also some things to keep in mind as we're going through this presentation. These are sort of, again, these guiding principles that you should have in the back of your head as we're talking through all this stuff. 1, social media is called social media for a reason. It is not a one-way street. If you want to succeed at social, you have to be communicative, right? You have to interact with your audience. You have to respond to people. If someone sends you a message on Facebook and you don't see it for 2 months, I'm probably not going to come back to you with another question if you don't answer the first one, right? So remember, this is all a 2-way street. You want to be interacting with people just as much as you're pushing out sort of your own content. Second is build a community. Social obviously is where lots of things, lots of chatter happens online. And when you think about building a community, it just helps keep everything really robust and your audience happy, right? It's not just one person, it's not 2 people. You want to really build, a community of followers who are going to be loyal to you, your brand, your organization, and what your message that you're trying to spread is. The 80-20 rule, I think actually Kathleen went over this in the previous presentation if you guys were here, but this basically is a rule that a lot of people use on social. It's also like a 70-30% if you want to look at it that way. But 80% of your 80% of the content you push out on social should not be business related or bragging or trying to sell a product or trying to get people to buy things, right? It needs to be more content that people will delight in or find useful or interesting or helpful. So that's 80% of what you should put out online. And the other 20% is kind of your sales message, right? It's your pitch. Come to our museum, buy this artwork, attend our event. That should be really only 20% of what you put out. And you can get away with that 20% when you do the work of the 80% that people find useful just in their day-to-day. Another thing I'm going to stress a lot is feeling free to experiment. I think a lot of people are really scared to sort of try new stuff on social, and you shouldn't be at all. It's so fast-paced that even if you mess up a little bit, chances are people are going to forget about it in a week, unless it's a very egregious error, which I doubt any of y'all will make. So feel free to play around. If you want to try out something, try it. There's really no harm in experimenting and trying new things. And kind of what goes along with that is having a personality. People don't want to follow no offense, just a PR mouthpiece, right, on social. They want to follow either you, if you're an artist, or an individual brand, or they want to follow your organization. And they want that organization to have a personality. That's how you're going to stand out on social amidst all the noise that comes in on the day-to-day. So I wanted to just go over a couple definitions that I'm going to be using. These words I'm going to be using a lot throughout the presentation, so I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. So I've already mentioned content. That is anything you put out online. That could be a blog post on your website. That could be a Facebook post. That could be a photo you post to Instagram. Anything you put out online is content. Engagement is another term you'll hear me use a lot. Engagement is whenever people interact with your content. So let's say I posted a photo on Instagram and someone comments. That's engagement. Engagement is really good, and that is what you want to happen. Finally, followers. It's referred to a lot of different ways, likes, followers, whatever. These are just people who have self-selected and want to hear what you're saying, right? They choose to follow you on Facebook, they choose to follow you on Instagram, they want to hear your message. So your followers is the group of people who have actively, wanted to hear from you. So we're going to make a digital content strategy, which is very exciting and a large bulk of what I do. I actually watched that movie last night. It was really creepy. I haven't seen it since I was a kid, and I was like really tripped out. So these are sort of the building blocks of digital content strategy. If you Google this, there will be like 8 million other steps that I don't want you guys to worry about. This is sort of what I found that when I'm building digital strategy for, my employer or a client that I'm working with, these are sort of the key things that I tell myself, as we're sort of going through this process. So the first step is to define your audience. This is something that a lot of people I think overlook, but it's really important because if you are sort of shouting out into the void, you're really not doing it with a plan, right? You're not trying to reach a certain person. So if you define your audience, if you define, who would you like to see come to your organization? Who would you like to see, buy your artwork? Who would you like to see, interacting with you the most? That's going to be your audience online, and it's really important to have an idea of who that person is before you even start trying to write social media posts. Let's say that I wanted my audience to be younger, right? I didn't want to, market to an older audience. I would write a Facebook post very differently for that audience than I would for, someone who's 70, right? There's just different tones of voice. So the first thing I would really recommend is trying to figure out who your audience is and who you want to talk to. The second step is figuring out what platforms you want to be on, right? So there's a lot of platforms that you could be on, some bigger than others. And it's really important not to try to do everything. That's something we'll come back to a little later, but you want to be really good at one or two things, right? You don't want to have kind of a toe in the water on Snapchat and a toe in the water on Facebook. You really want to hone in on what platforms are working best for you. And so we'll kind of get to this later when we go over individual platforms, but it's worth keeping in mind. You want to definitely, commit to certain social media networks and just sort of go with what's working. Next one is kind of simple, but really also important. Define your goals. So if your goal is to increase attendance, that looks, attendance at a physical event, that looks a lot different than just sending people to your website, right? So those are two different goals. So if you, think about your brand, if you think about your organization and say, okay, these are sort of the three key, goals we want to hit. How can your social media help serve those goals? They can be kind of different than, what maybe if you have a board, what your board goals are. But you should always kind of keep everything in the framework of, is whatever I'm doing online helping me achieve my social media goal? The next one, and we'll talk about this a little more on the next slide, is designating content buckets. So I find this really helpful when I'm trying to plan out what I'm going to do online. And it's basically just something to keep in your back pocket where you have, maybe 5 or 6 different post types. Maybe one is behind the scenes, one is an artist interview, just sort of different content buckets that you can pull from. When you have that framework, it becomes a lot easier to figure out what social media posts that you want to put up. And the fifth one, and also really important, is developing your voice online. Like I said, people want to follow brands who have a personality. They don't just want you to parrot, whatever the phrase of the day is back at them. So if you really, ask yourself, what does your brand stand for? How do you want to be defined online? For example, at the Blanton, we had a few adjectives that defined how the Blantons should talk. And some of them were welcoming, worldly, and witty. So whenever I wrote social media posts for the Blanton, I would try to figure out, okay, is what I'm writing welcoming? Is what I'm writing witty, hopefully? And you should always come back to these keywords, these adjectives that will define how you interact with people online. So just to kind of give some more examples of content buckets that work specifically for art or creative organizations. Photos of art and artworks is kind of your bread and butter, or if you're a performance, organization, if you have photos of performers, photos of events, this is kind of your really basic, you want to show people online what your product is, right? Behind the scenes do really, really well if you, go on a studio visit with someone, if you take a trip to New York City and you're meeting with people, if you can take photos and show that, anything that sort of shows what your organization does to keep everything going. People tend to really respond to that. Studio visits. Interesting facts about your organization. If you have a really interesting origin story, that could be really good to share on social. Just things that are sort of can build your brand and help people think about why they want to follow you. Community partnerships is another great one. If you are working with people, tell everyone about it. That's a really awesome thing to partner with other organizations, so that can be another content bucket that you dip into. This is sort of social media bread and butter, these like random weird holidays. I made up National Paintbrush Day. I don't know if that's a thing. But like, for example, at Texas Monthly, it was National Tequila Day. So we shared a picture of a agave farmer actually cutting down an agave plant. So it was kind of a twist on how most people would share maybe like a shot or a margarita or something. But we sort of took it in a different approach and did something unique. So definitely look up sort of these national holidays, or if you see, something trending on Twitter, if there's anything in your organization that you can sort of filter into that, that's always a great thing to do. So now that you have all this awesome content, where are you going to put it? This gets back to brands. Where do you want to be? Do you want to be on Instagram with all the cool hip kids sharing their gifts? Or do you want to be on Facebook, which is a little more conservative? Another big spoiler alert, if you only have time for one network, it should be Facebook. I really cannot state that enough. I tell pretty much everybody this who I work with. It's really, really important. And there's a lot of reasons why. Facebook is the largest social network. It is, leaps and bounds above everybody else. So they have over 2 billion active monthly users. Those are the people who use Facebook monthly, which is just kind of incredible when you think about it. 5 new profiles are created every single second. Most people spend 20 minutes on Facebook per visit. So that is not per day, that is per visit. If I go to Facebook, I am on average going to spend 20 minutes. Obviously, I will spend a lot longer, but the average person, right, who's not a social media manager is going to spend 20 minutes. So that's a long time that you have to try to get your content in front of other people's eyeballs. 1 in 5 page views on the internet occurs on Facebook. This includes websites. 1 out of every 5 website visits is on Facebook. These are pretty staggering numbers. There's a reason why Mark Zuckerberg is a billionaire, right? I really can't stress enough, if you're going to do one platform, it should be Facebook. So these are some tips and tricks that I have found that work really well. And a lot of this is, obviously, I'm sure you guys have heard about Facebook's algorithm. It is this ever-changing beast that you have to respond to. And I wish I could tell you guys, what I'm saying here will apply in 6 months, but I can't guarantee that. Facebook's algorithm changes constantly, and really the best way to keep up with it is to just read stuff online. Like every month or so, just Google Facebook algorithm, and you will find articles that will tell you, what it responds to. So the first thing is use images with little or no text. This gets back to the algorithm, right? Facebook decided arbitrarily that images with more than 20% text are bad, and that's my language, not theirs. And if you use images that have, if it's like a graphic, right, and you have big text splashed across it, Facebook thinks that that is not as good of an image as one that has no text. So a lot of you, if you've experimented with Facebook ads, you'll probably know this, but if you try to do a Facebook ad with more than 20% text, it used to be that Facebook wouldn't let you post it at all. So, but now they've sort of transitioned to, in your just feed normally, if you're posting sort of an organic post or one that you don't put any advertising dollars behind, if you do 20% text, it'll actually get shown to less people. So if you have identical posts and one post has an image with text and one post doesn't, the post that doesn't will do better. So that's just like right off the bat, try to use images that are have no text, are really engaging. And obviously as art and creative organizations, we have a lot of that content. It's really great. You guys should have a lot of photos that could be really useful like this. The next thing that the Facebook algorithm does not like is promotional language. So if you say things like, buy my album today, or shop on my website, or any other sort of promotional language where you're trying to get people to buy something or buy a ticket or click here, Facebook, in its weird, creepy overlord way, knows that you're writing that, and it will actually not show your post to as many people because it thinks you should be paying for an ad. That's how they make money. So if you're going to share content on Facebook, try to make it really engaging. Don't tell people to kind of do that action because it's just not going to get shown to as many people. This is another one that's kind of, it's the secret sauce. What works for some people won't work for others. But experiment with different post types. So don't always post links, right? Maybe switch it up with a photo. If you can, do a video. This could be something as simple as a cell phone video if you want. But play around with different things and see what works best for you and your audience. And the same thing goes for times. So maybe try a week where you post in the morning only on Facebook, and then the next week try only posting in the evening and seeing how those two compare. This is keeping the social and social media. You want to experiment with other pages. Sorry, not experiment with other pages, engage with other pages. If you are, again, working with someone else in the community, start liking their posts on Facebook. This sort of has, the advantage of being social, right? So you're engaging with the community. But if someone else goes to the community partnership page and sees their post, and they can kind of see that, maybe the Blanton Museum of Art like that. It's just another way to get your page in front of people. So the more you can interact, comment, like posts, that's all really, really important. I mentioned this at the beginning, but be responsive. People want to know that you are available. Facebook actually has this very, very annoying feature where if you have a Facebook page and you don't respond to a message quickly enough, they won't turn on this little icon that says you're responsive. So it's like 20 minutes or less. You have to respond really quickly to Facebook messages in order for Facebook to turn this little yes, you should message this page button on. It's really a lot to ask, I think, from people, but the underlying concept is there, right? You should be responsive. If people send you a message, reply to it. If they leave a really nice comment on a photo you did, say thanks. There's totally nothing wrong with saying thank you to people and just sort of being conversational. Again, keeping the social in social media. And finally, this is sort of the culmination. You want to research the algorithm. Obviously, over the past couple years, Facebook has really promoted videos. So really, just even in the last year, my Facebook feed went from mostly photos to almost 90% videos, probably. I'm sure you guys see this too. When you're on Facebook, you just see videos. And that's because Facebook thinks that that's what people want to see. So now publishers are creating more videos to try to get higher in the algorithm. And that's something they know because they research the algorithm and they sort of do the legwork to know what Facebook wants you to do. So when we get to the resources page, I'll cover a couple websites that can help you do that, but it's just really important to do kind of some of the heavy lifting to prepare yourself for how you're going to post your content. Which also brings us to Facebook is a pay-to-play network. So back in the olden days of Facebook, you could post something and it would reach a lot of people, right? You didn't have to really do a lot. This is how pages got, hundreds of thousands of likes back in, 2010, 2011. You saw a lot of, it's called organic growth. Pages that didn't really have to do anything, no sponsoring, no advertising money to grow the audience of their pages. When Facebook went public with their IPO, that changed. They needed to make money, right? They're a business now, publicly traded. So they are really heavily investing in advertising. And now Facebook has changed their algorithm so that if you don't pay them money to show your content to people, they're going to show it to a fraction of the people that they would have 4 years ago. So that's their way of making money. And it's really dramatic. You can see if you Google, Facebook algorithm, organic reach, it's down to like 2 to 3% of your audience sees your posts if you don't put advertising money behind them. And it used to be, a lot higher, like in the 50 to 60%. So Facebook is kind of throttling your audience to make you pay them money. So this doesn't have to be a bad thing if you kind of look at it as an opportunity instead of, something bad. So that brings us to Facebook ads. If you really want to take advantage of Facebook and kind of be the best you can be, you need to invest in advertising. There's just no other way around it. It's really what you have to do. The good thing is you don't have to invest a lot, right? If you don't really have an advertising budget, if you're a really small organization, if you are one person, something as little as $5 to $10 could help. So what we're going to do is kind of go over some best practices if you're just getting started with Facebook ads. The simplest thing is if you have a post that's already doing well, just boost it. Facebook gives you a little option. It says boost post. It's really easy. You kind of fill out a little form. You pay them, $5-10, and it shows it to a wider audience. That's sort of like Facebook advertising 101, right? When you do that, it's really important, I think, when you're first starting out to use interest targeting. So this means you're sort of telling Facebook the type of audience that you want to see your post. If you're an art organization, you might say, okay, I want to target people who are interested in the arts, museums, fine art, and Facebook gives you some, suggestions of additional categories that you can highlight. Again, this gets back to you don't have to pay a lot of money, right? $10, $20, it will work, it will give you results. And I think it's really smart at first to sort of start with these little micro amounts. Don't feel like you have to do $100 a post if you don't have that. Sort of play around with these little sort of, micro ads and see what works. And if something really takes off, maybe you throw more money at that one than you would if something didn't work as well. Something we did at the Blanton that was pretty successful was create ads for repeating events or series. So we have a program at the Blanton called Beat the Rush, which happens every third Thursday. So we did a Facebook campaign for 2 years. I don't know if they're still doing it, but it was 2+ years. And we would do Facebook ads every single month for Beat the Rush. It was just a way to remind people it was happening. It was a signature program we really wanted to focus on. And although we didn't have a lot of concrete data to sort of back up if it worked or not, our manager of public programs said once we, started running those regularly, he saw an increase in attendance at Beat the Rush. So, if you really have a signature program that you want to get in people's minds, consider throwing, some Facebook money behind it. And finally, don't worry if it's not perfect, if something doesn't work. 1, you can always do it again. And 2, experimenting is awesome, right? You want to experiment and find out what works. It's not going to be perfect. And this gets back to, you can learn through experimentation. I had no idea how to do Facebook ads when I started at Blanton, and I just really sort of taught myself. There wasn't like a class I took or anything, so if I can do that, y'all can do it. I believe in you. So just experiment with Facebook ads. So some qualities of successful Facebook ads are visually striking. They use, images without text. We kind of already went over why Facebook makes you do that. They don't have long text captions. You're kind of competing for a really quick window when someone's scrolling through Facebook, right? If you write a book, probably not going to read that, right? I'm going to read like 1.5 sentences and then keep going. So really try to make your copy short, concise, telling people what you want them to hear, and don't write kind of these long-winded paragraphs if you're doing a Facebook ad. Oops. You also want your Facebook ads to be relevant to whatever audience you pick. So this gets back to defining your audience and knowing how to write for it. If I'm throwing, a millennial 21 plus event, right? Like the Thinkery, I think, does Thinkery 21, which is really fun. if I'm writing a fictitious ad for Thinkery 21, I'm probably not going to target 65-year-old men, right? I'm going to want to target that to the audience I want to come to the event. So don't waste your advertising money and set the age parameters from 16 all the way up to 70, right? Really think about targeting who you want to attend your event, who you want to see your content. And finally, the best thing you can do with Facebook ads is have a call to action. You want to tell people this is what you're paying for, right? In your normal Facebook, you can't tell them shop now, click here, whatever. This is where you get to do it, right? So you want to have a clear action that people can do. Visit your website, buy a ticket, whatever. So this brings us to Instagram. If you have time for 2 platforms, I would recommend Instagram as the next one. So some stats about Instagram: 400 million daily active users. That number is climbing. Instagram has exploded in popularity over the last couple of years. It's important to know that Facebook owns Instagram, so you'll see a lot of similar features on both platforms, which can be awesome and not so awesome. 50% of people on Instagram follow at least one brand. So that number is important to pay attention to because you want to be that brand, right? You want to convince people that you have good enough content that they should incorporate you into their daily sort of Instagram use. 5% of people take action after being inspired by a post. So it seems like a small number, but if you sell, 5 artworks out of 100 people who saw your post, that's a pretty big number, right? So it's really important, again, to create calls to action on Instagram and sort of drive people to do something. I think Instagram is perfect for arts organizations and creatives. And you can't really see it, but that little asterisk, the source is me, not anything official. I just think it is like the most brilliant platform for creatives, people who have really visually striking content, people who have content that is not sort of your everyday doom and gloom kind of stuff. So keep that in mind. Like, you have every right to be on Instagram as Newsweek or Texas Monthly, and use that to your advantage. Some tips and tricks for Instagram. I don't know if this is a real thing, but define your Instagram aesthetic. So Instagram obviously is a very visual platform, and successful Instagram feeds work within a color palette. Whether that is, a lot of people will filter, their photos to make them kind of tinted blue, or they'll have a lot of like really brightly lit photos, or they'll have, lots of dark and moody photos. Try to think of how cohesive your Instagram feed looks as a whole, because people, when they decide to follow you or not, will go to your actual feed and kind of scroll through your pictures. They're not coming across you in the timeline, so you really want your Instagram to stand out and pop. Make every image beautiful. This is super, super, super important. If you have a bad photo, people are just gonna scroll right by, right? You need to have something really visually striking and beautiful if you want people to stop what they're doing and click on your feed. So I think with Instagram, this manifests in quality over quantity. If you take 15 really terribly lit photos of a museum tour, I would scrap those and post your one really good photo of something else, right? Always emphasize quality over quantity. It's okay if you're not posting every day, as long as you really make that experience for the user beautiful and awesome. Going along with that is writing enticing captions. So ideally, what you want people to do when they scroll through your Instagram feed is to look at your photo, read your caption, and then look back up at your photo, because it just makes them kind of stay on that post longer. So what I do with this is try to call out a specific detail in the image, right? Or write something that gets people to kind of look a little closer at the image. And just whatever you can do to make the writing experience as awesome as possible for your users is going to result in a lot more people feeling affinity for your brand. Again, this gets back to what we talked about on Facebook. Engage with other users. You should be liking and commenting on people's stuff. Even if it's like 5 minutes out of your day, right? If you have 5 minutes where you're drinking your coffee in the morning, getting ready for work, scroll through your feed and just like some photos, right? And comment on stuff. It doesn't have to be where you check in every hour on the hour, right? Just carve out some time and do it and get it done, and then when you build all those things up, it really has an impact. And finally, experiment with Instagram stories. So these are disappearing photos or videos that, like Snapchat, only appear for 24 hours and then they go away. This is kind of your place to be more playful, I think, on Instagram, to kind of show off your personality a little more. You don't have to, worry about making them so beautiful. You can kind of have fun with it. Great things for Instagram stories are behind the scenes type stuff. If you're, again, doing a studio visit or something like that, or rehearsal, really good stuff to showcase on Instagram stories. So this is an example of an awesome Instagram feed. It is one of my favorites on Instagram. It's the Getty. They do such a good job of making every single post really beautiful. So you can see they sort of have these like really stunning photos, right? They look like professional photography. And you can also see sort of what I'm talking about with the Instagram aesthetic. Everything's really light. They sort of have this green tone that runs through it. If you look at enough Instagram feeds, like, you will start to pick up on this and see it. So look at accounts that have a lot of followers and kind of see what they do. And if there's a way for you to sort of copy that, go ahead. This is an example of a really bad Instagram feed. It's just kind of right? Like, they screenshotted stuff. You can see like text in there. You can see that they liked one of their photos. Like, it's just kind of all over the place and doesn't really say anything. So if you compare this to that, you can kind of see what I'm talking about, right, with this Instagram aesthetic. So this brings us to Twitter. I have a lot of thoughts on Twitter. Lots of thoughts. Twitter's interesting, right? Let's just get into it. So, Twitter, some stats. 328 million monthly active users. Seems okay, right? Skews more male than Facebook or Instagram, which is really interesting because most social media platforms actually skew female. So if you have, for whatever reason, like a really male, oriented organization, like, maybe you should try out Twitter. 79% of accounts are based outside of the US. So if you're trying to reach people kind of in your community and really like target it to US based stuff, not a great stat. And finally, Twitter has a pretty uncertain future as a publicly traded company. So like Facebook, they went public. Unlike Facebook, their stock is tanking. They can't get advertising revenue the way Facebook is. Lots of executives have left Twitter in the past year. They've actually brought back some of the people who founded Twitter to try to help the sinking ship. Twitter's just in a big state of uncertainty right now. So if you don't already have a Twitter, I don't necessarily know if I'd recommend starting one. It's just, you're gonna be kind of fighting an uphill battle. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't, right? If you have time and you feel like you really have an audience on Twitter, go for it, right? Again, it's all about experimentation and finding out what works for you and your brand. So if you do want to start a Twitter, here's what I would recommend. Twitter, more than anything, has a very unique community, right? They're a loud bunch. They really enjoy sharing opinions. They will tell you if you do something wrong, speaking from personal experience. It's a very kind of chatty, real-time platform. So I would recommend starting your own personal Twitter if you're thinking about one for a brand first, just so you can kind of get a sense of the community, you can get a sense of what topics are trending, how to use it. It's just kind of a way to get your feet wet before you dive in. Kind of getting back to that, experimenting with a more irreverent tone of voice. I think you can be more playful on Twitter than you can on other platforms. It's a little looser, it's not quite as conservative. Sort of your grandma and grandpa's on Facebook. There's a lot of younger people on Twitter, so keep that in mind. It's the easiest platform to share GIFs on. Embrace that. Twitter loves reaction GIFs and images, so really make your tweets pop by having images, by having GIFs. Kind of, again, use the language of how Twitter users are communicating with each other to make your brand have a personality and stand out. This is my biggest pet peeve ever. Don't overuse hashtags. Just don't do it. I hate when I see like every word in a tweet hashtag. It bugs the crap out of me. That is not going to reach more people. It just looks spammy, and you look like you don't know what you're doing. So again, go back to Twitter, start a profile, see what brands are tweeting, right? Follow, some brands that are similar to yours, maybe in another city, and kind of try to copy what they do. There's no shame in, copying something that you think would work well for your brand. And finally, again, as with every platform, engage with the community. This is like the constant thread, right, that we keep coming back to. This is an example of an awesome tweet I found from the Smithsonian. It is just bizarrely awesome, right? I don't know why it's so funny, but it is. So this kind of accomplishes a couple things. It, one, quotes the National Zoo, which is a Smithsonian entity, right? So they're engaging, right? They're being social by connecting with another account. They're tagging them, so that's great. It sends people back to that account. And it's showing personality. Would you expect, like, the Smithsonian proper to tweet this? No, but it's awesome. They know kind of that language on Twitter, right? And they know how to, say things that will be interesting to their audience. This is an example of a really bad tweet that I tweeted and then deleted because I couldn't leave it up. So again, hashtagging everything, really bad. No image, really bad, right? Nothing about this stands out. Please retweet, just sounds desperate. Please don't do that. So this is kind of what you should not do, right? No one's going to be searching hashtag in. If you have a hashtag, if you have a hashtag that is really widely used, that is totally different, right? If there's a trending hashtag, National Ice Cream Day, whatever, use that to get into the conversation, but don't just make up your own hashtags, right? I did some research and tried to find one that really worked for Austin and like Austin museums or arts organizations, and there really isn't one. I think the closest I found was ATX Museums, which is like really Austin museum partnership. So think about, trying, again, go into those communities and see what hashtags they're using and then try to copy it instead of just making up your own. So this brings us to a really important part of social media that is kind of social media 102, I guess, over 101, but it's analytics. Analytics are super, super important. This is a meme that's like really gaining steam right now, and I just had to figure out a way to use it. So I will share a secret with y'all. Analytics are really confusing. Like, I look at them sometimes, and I'm sort of like, okay, and then I close it and then look at something else, right? They can be really confusing. It's a lot of information, and not all of it is going to be relevant to you. These are screenshots of 3 different Google Analytics platforms. I just pulled them off the internet to protect, privacy. I don't know what that bottom left one means. Like, I have no idea. So just, like, this is my job, and I don't know what that means. So again, it's okay if you don't really understand kind of everything, right? You want to focus on 1, 2, 3 things that can start your analytics journey, right? So again, focus on the basics. If you have no analytics experience, start with really easy stuff, likes, comments, and shares. This is something that, is a great way to start out and kind of get a feel for what's working. If something has tons of likes, awesome, that's really good. If something has a lot of shares, also really good. Try and replicate success. This is how BuzzFeed got so huge. They are obsessed with iterating off of data. If something works, they repeat it ad nauseum until like you are totally sick of seeing 8,000 ways that'll change your life, right? They just know how to A/B test really well, where they test sort of one thing at a time and see what works. So you can do this just on a smaller scale. You don't have to do it at that level. If you, maybe you're writing a Facebook post and you say the same copy in the text, right? But you try one with one image and you try one with another image. Maybe the images, one has people in it, one doesn't, and see which one performs better. And you can kind of do these tests over and over and over, and eventually you'll sort of have a better idea of what content your audience responds to. Start a monthly log. This again is kind of that, like, unless you're a data freak, really annoying to do, but really helpful once you've done it. So start with really basic things like your follower counts, new followers, your overall reach or impressions, engagement rate. These are all things that you can find either through Facebook analytics, Instagram analytics, if you have them. They're not available for everyone, unfortunately. And just start keeping track of this stuff. And 6 months down the line, take half an hour and go look at it and see, okay, I had a huge jump in followers from February to March. Why is that? And see if you can go figure it out. Once you start sort of looking at these things over time, trends start to emerge. Once you have the basics, you can graduate to Facebook Insights, which is Facebook's proprietary platform. So use Insights to guide your posting strategy. If you look at it and see that one post reached 100,000 people and one post reached 5,000 people, why is that, right? Kind of look at them and figure out, was this copy shorter? Was it snappier? Was the image better? Try to start really thinking about things in a critical way, not a critical way, but critically thinking your way through posts to figure out what's working for you. I'm not afraid to admit that I use Facebook's Help Center all the time. They have some weird stuff in there, and if you don't know what it is, just go to their Help Center. It'll explain it. I don't even go directly to their Help Center. I just Google it, which also works. And think back to your goals, right? Those sort of 3 goals we talked about in the beginning. How can analytics help you with that? This is an example of something on Facebook Insights. This is times when your fans are online. So I kind of highlighted 4 a.m. There's only 24,000 people online for the Texas Monthly at 4 in the morning. Probably not gonna post then, right? Because you're not really gonna reach the widest possible audience. But if you look kind of around the 9 p.m., that's when the bulk of our audience is online. So I can use Facebook Insights to figure out, okay, I should be posting, generally around 9 in the evening. And again, let this kind of be a guide, but don't let it cripple you, right? You can still experiment with other stuff. You can post stuff in the morning and see if it does well, but also post stuff in the evening and kind of let your data guide you a little bit. So this kind of brings us to wrapping up with resources. Social Media Examiner is this really kitschy, weird website, but it is so awesome with content. They have a lot of really good articles. I think their logo is an explorer hanging from a palm tree. It's really weird, but they have lots of really good stuff. So I look there a lot if I'm trying to find Facebook algorithm updates. It's just a really great website for social media. If you really want to dive into Facebook ads, John Loomer is this Facebook ad expert, so much that I get these really targeted Facebook ads to him asking why I didn't finish his Facebook quiz or something. He's really good at what he does. So if you're looking for a lot of overview of how to set up Facebook Facebook ads, great place to start. If you are looking for, graphic design type stuff, if you don't have a graphic designer on staff, Canva is a really good online tool that you can use. It just helps you create, images that look, designed if you need to do a flyer or something like that. And then finally, if you want to schedule social media, which is really helpful if you just kind of want to set it and forget it during the first part of the week, Buffer is a great free app. You can schedule stuff on Twitter and Facebook, and you just do it all at once, and it'll send it out during the week for you. So Buffer is a great tool if you don't have a lot of time and kind of want to let something else help you post. Which brings us to questions. I think we have 5-10 minutes left maybe. So let's take some questions. Yeah.
In terms of an annual event, is there kind of a strategy so that you don't burn out? I mean, is it the end of the year instead of the first? Or would you do some different strategy?
So the question is, if you have an annual event, what does the strategy for that look like? I think with events, the closer you can get I wouldn't start talking about an event in November and January, right? Because you want to kind of keep people interested in it. So again, this depends on kind of what the event is and what your audience is doing, but I would maybe start with like a 2 to 3 month lead time if it's huge, and then sort of create updates and kind of they reach a critical mass, you know, closer to the event itself. Yeah.
You mentioned hashtags being a terrible idea for Twitter, but what about for Instagram? They have specific hashtags you can look at to get more likes, and I found it to be really helpful for Instagram.
Yeah, so the question, I'm repeating them for the feed, is hashtags on Instagram. She's found them really helpful. I think Instagram hashtags can definitely be helpful in a way that Twitter ones aren't. I think Instagram, you do want to be careful about not using too many. You know, if you hashtag 50 and your caption's like 10 words, that doesn't look great. It's all about kind of ratios, right? But if you find ones that really inspire engagement and, you know, bring your brand to a wider audience, you can definitely use them. Again, it's like all about different platforms. There's certain things that work for some platforms, certain things that work for others.
About metrics in Facebook. One thing that I noticed in my personal account, I cannot see insights, but on the community, on the organization account, I am allowed to see insights. So the trick would be to set oneself up as an organization. What would you say?
So the question was, he can't see insights on his personal account, but he can on the community account. So that's right. Facebook only gives you insights if you have a page. If you just have a personal Facebook that you set up as an individual, you don't get insights, and your posts only reach the people you're friends with if you have your privacy settings set. So if you're a brand, if you're an organization, you need to make a Facebook page. You need to create one. You need to consider that the central hub of all your Facebook activities. If you have a personal account that is serving as your sort of professional account, turn it into a page. Just make a page instead. Yeah.
Me?
Back behind you, and then you can go next.
We have an organization page, and for a couple of years I've wanted to boost posts,
Mhm.
but all the posts say no boost available. Why is that? What is that? I've asked people, nobody knows.
So she's asking, she's tried to boost posts for a couple years, and Facebook won't let her. I don't know without looking at it. I think, you know, go back, is it when you boost them, Facebook says you cannot boost this ad?
It's written there, like where ordinarily it would say boost, it says no boost.
No boost.
available on-
If that's what's happening, I would try creating a straight Facebook ad through Ads Manager instead. You might have to do this kind of the hard way where you start with the more complicated ad system instead of just the boosting. You can also look in the Help Center maybe to see if there's something in there about why boosted posts won't boost. I just can't tell you more without looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah, how do you feel about on Instagram I can push the button that also will show on Facebook. So it works great because I can hit 2 by the time of 1, but then I see my friends' posts that I just liked on Facebook and then I see them again on Instagram and it's kind of annoying. And how do you feel about that?
So she was asking about boosting posts on Instagram. You also see them on Facebook, and seeing the same stuff is annoying. I agree. I think, you know, when you're creating content for social media, you know, we talked about how all these platforms are different, right? Facebook is different than Twitter, which is different than Instagram, which is different than Snapchat. So when you're writing copy for different platforms, really try to make it unique to that platform. You know, reuse the same stuff, but maybe don't post it the same day. Maybe you change your caption a little bit. Maybe you know, if you took 2 photos of the same thing, use a different photo. As much as you can, try to tailor your content to the platform that you're on, because you're right, it will look better, you know, if you're really engaging with that specific platform than just trying to like churn out stuff. And as an aside to that, I know many brands use auto posting, where they'll turn on like, oh, I post on Facebook and it sends it over to Twitter. How convenient. It is convenient, but it looks really bad to users, right? It looks like you don't have enough time to invest in another platform. So it's really important, if you have the time and you can devote, you know, an extra 5 minutes to rewriting a post for Instagram versus Facebook, you really should do that because it just makes your brand look like you care about social media a little more. Yeah.
Would you recommend using Facebook Pixel to track visitors to your website?
Totally. If you are at that stage, like, yes, install the Pixel, use it to retarget. I didn't really want to get into it because that's kind of like your next level. A Facebook Pixel is super creepy. You put it on your website. When people go to your website, Facebook then tracks you around the internet. It's why I will go to like Nordstrom and then get shown 3 dresses that I almost bought, and they're like, come back and please buy these. So that's what the Facebook pixel does. It remarkets your content to audiences. So if you're at that stage, like absolutely 1000% do that. Yeah.
Is there a number of posts that you can see work like throughout a day-to-day basis or a weekly basis?
The question was if you, do I know about posting frequency and if there's some that work for a daily or weekly basis. You know, it kind of depends. I think, especially with Facebook and Instagram, because things get shuffled around now, the feed isn't strictly a timeline. It sort of shows you stuff that you're more likely to engage with. You know, it's really hard to say. I think, again, this gets back to experimenting, right? Like Texas Monthly puts out 5 to 10 Facebook posts a day, right? But that's because we have that much stuff to keep us going. You know, if you're a smaller brand and you can only post on Facebook a couple times a week, like do as much as you're able, but don't get super bogged down with like, oh, I must post, 10 tweets a day or the world's gonna end, right? Just try to, keep up with it as much as possible and worry less about how much you're posting, for very specific numbers. Yeah.
I don't use Facebook a lot. I have a personal page and I have an art studio page with my artwork on it. And sometimes, it says you have new views, you have new likes, but I don't know where these people come from and I don't know how to reach them again. Is there a way to get back to them when I want to put a new post up? How does this work?
So the question was, she has a Facebook page and has notifications that she has new likes or new views, but doesn't know how to reach them. That is like the great mystery of Facebook, right? You get followers and then you try really hard to surface your content to them again. There's no way really to track where they're coming from unless you're pretty advanced with analytics and can kind of dive into, are they coming from like a website? Are they just finding you organically? If you look at your Facebook insights, you can sort of see some of it. But, that's the great mystery, right? If you make good content that kind of follows these rules and best practices, it'll get shown to more people. But unless you specifically pay Facebook to like do an ad that only goes to your followers, there's really no way to sort of say, okay, I will reach these last 3 people who liked my page. That's just not how it works, unfortunately. Yeah.
Do boosted posts say sponsored on them as well? I've noticed that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the question was, do boosted posts say sponsored on them? Yes. Anything that you see on Facebook that has sponsored means someone paid money to put that there. And then right next to her.
My question was, we're really small, just the 2 of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a very clear Facebook page for our business and our brand and our own separate. Twitter is just for the business, but with Instagram, there seems to be a lot of crossover, especially with creative and with things. People don't differentiate their personal from their business as much. Do you have any comments on that?
The question was about differentiating personal Instagram accounts from business ones. That's just kind of a personal call for, what's right for your organization. If you're like just an artist, it makes sense maybe, and you're sort of on your own to just have an Instagram page that is sort of your like personal professional profile. Like my Twitter is both personal and professional, same with my Instagram. Like I'm sort of conscious that I'm using these as marketing tools. Whereas, my Facebook is a little more personal, like I don't friend everyone on there. So I think it really just depends on your organization, and if you see, something that works for you, just keep doing it, right? It's all about experimenting. Yeah.
So you talked about analytics in terms of like Facebook and like Facebook Insights, but what about, other than experimentation, what about like for Instagram in terms of how can I find out like when are more people using Instagram, when are like, how do I know how many people are coming to my page on Instagram? Is there a resource for that, or is it just experimentation?
So it depends on how complicated you want to get. The question was, how does she find out how, people are getting to you on Instagram, right, or how to reach them? Because Instagram is now an algorithmic feed, there really isn't like a best time anymore that people are online. It depends. Before when you went to Instagram, you saw, okay, 5 minutes ago, Susie posted this, 10 minutes ago, Johnny posted this. Now it's 5 days ago, I see Susie's post because she hasn't posted in a while, right? So it's a lot different. So if you really want to get like really into it and you're trying to send people back to your website, I would recommend UTM links. It's something I use for every single Texas Monthly post, and it's a little more complicated because you have to make sure to tag every single link you're sharing with these UTM parameters. But what it allows me to do is go back to our website and say, okay, we had 856 visits from our Instagram story link. You know, we had 6 visits from our Twitter link. And so we can kind of compare and contrast. So if you're doing a lot of like link in bio type stuff, that's one way you can kind of track it. And then also if your account has Instagram analytics on it, you can track it that way. But again, like not all accounts have that. So it's, you know, it's kind of hit or miss. Yeah, is it all the way in the back?
So I have 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
So you were talking about the ratio of the text to the image
Mm-hmm.
of the post. So I'm assuming you were talking about not the text of the caption, but the text on the image or the file that you're going to upload.
The question was about text and Facebook. So I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. If you're uploading an image to Facebook, don't put text on that image. So like if I have a picture of like me giving a talk and I say, join me in the image itself, like attention, Allie Klein, on the image itself, not the caption, that is what you should not do. Just use images like as if you took them on a camera, right, and didn't do any additional editing or graphic design to them. In terms of caption length, when you're like physically typing text into Facebook, do whatever you want with that. It doesn't, I would recommend shorter, but it doesn't really matter how short or long that is in terms of the Facebook algorithm.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question was, you had mentioned you only have a personal page, you know, you're using it as a personal page, but you also want to use it, you know, to get out there to people that you don't know, to turn it into a community page. But if you turn it into a community page, does it make sense to continue using it as a personal page? Like, for me, I don't get super personal on my personal page. You know, I use it to promote exhibits or classes I'm teaching. You know, and I will throw some personal stuff in there, but it's always more like, you know, videos that I'm a photographer. So it all kind of relates, but I don't get super personal on it.
Yeah, the question is again about personal versus brand stuff. I think it just, if that's working for you, keep doing it. You know, some people really like to separate out their brands from their personal stuff. And if I was working with a company, I would advise them to have, you know, a very professional presence, right? Because then people don't have to worry about seeing like a cat picture, right? Which actually wouldn't be that bad. But, you know, if you're posting like your kid's first day of school next to an artwork you're trying to sell, that doesn't look great. But if what you're doing is not that personal and it contributes to your brand, then keep doing it. You know, again, this is like, there's no secret sauce. If you are doing something that works and feels right, like, keep doing it. Don't just take something from me and do it because I told you to do it.
So if you turn it into a community page, could you can still continue to use it kind of personally, or just no changes?
I would not do that.
Okay.
If you have a page on Facebook, I would not make it any sort of personal page unless you're like an artist.
Okay.
Yes.
Like when you roll it over, like you roll up to the page, you lose.
Right, exactly.
What are some tricks for getting people to come over and like?
Paid posts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the question was when you turn an individual Facebook page into a brand page, you lose everything, right? You have to start from scratch. You can't merge personal profiles and a brand page. So if you start a brand page, you're gonna have to put serious money behind that to grow it, or you need to reach out to your network of contacts and tell them to like stuff. So you can do that by like putting it on a business card, right? Have a link to your Facebook page. Start thinking of more creative ways to get people to like your page. But again, it comes back to content, right? If you have a lot of great content, people will like your page. It just won't happen as fast as if you put money behind it. Yeah.
So again, that's kind of piggybacking on these questions with personal versus your business page. You can't invite them to like your page unless you're friends with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I do put personal stuff, my kids, political things on my personal, and I'd rather get them over to my business page and then kind of like not be friends with them, just have them over here. Is there a way to invite them to like your page without being friends?
The question is there a way to invite people to your Facebook page without being friends? Not really. It just, I mean, you can like, I'm trying to think of like a way that would work.
With a boosted post, anyone that likes the post, you can go through and individually like all of them. Every single person will like the page.
Even if you're on
It's time consuming.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily think that's the best way to go about it. I think if you want to keep them truly separate, make a post on your personal page and say like, if you want to follow my business, you must go follow this Facebook page. I won't be posting any more updates, whatever. And just keep trying to drive traffic there, right? Post that link everywhere. Tell people that this is where they can see content, you know. I wouldn't get super hung up into like inviting people to like it, unless you're like, because you don't want to be spammy, right? You just want to kind of have it be a more organic thing. I mean, we're getting kind of in the weeds here. I think, you know, I'm available to chat afterwards if y'all have more questions and kind of talk about specific scenarios. And I think that's pretty much our time. So thank you guys so much. So awesome.
When you get introduced, are you introduced ever as